Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the 2042 season, at least the regular season version of it, has gone about as well for the Oakland Athletics as any team in baseball history. An all-time record for a regular season 120 win and 42 loss season for our Oakland A's. We lost 42 games on the entire year, and we were 42 games ahead of our two closest rivals in the American League West, the Angels and the Rangers. So our A's, as we prepare for the playoffs, are as well positioned as we could possibly hope to be. First place in the AL West for a fifth consecutive season, best record in baseball for a third consecutive season, and a completely dominant offense and a completely dominant pitching staff that was first in the American League in runs allowed and first in the American League in runs scored for a second consecutive season, as we try to hopefully guide our Oakland Athletics to a fourth World Series title in the last 7 years. However, unfortunately, all of the news is not good for our Oakland A's as we start preparing for the postseason. Our number 2 starter, Doug Weiss, has been out since the beginning of September and still going to miss another week with a hamstring strain. Our number 3 starter for most of this season, Mike Blumenshine, is done for the year with a rotator cuff strain. And Luis Villarreal, a rookie who we signed to a long-term deal when he was in Double-A ball this year, and we expect will be at worst a number 2 starter for us going forward, is also out for another 1 to 2 weeks with a herniated disc in his back. Making things even more challenging is that Ernesto Comunez, who has been a starter for us often over the last few years, but in a perfect scenario is not in the rotation. Right now would almost certainly be in the 4-man rotation as we prepare for the postseason. I think the big question after we get through these upcoming wild card series is to see what type of shape Weiss is in. The concern is that he hasn't pitched since early September, and there's really no mechanism with the minor league seasons over at this point for us to get him any playing time to shake off the rust. So he's going to come back from this injury. He's not going to have pitched for about 6 weeks, most likely, when we'll be potentially asking him to pitch a big postseason game. And it's very conceivable that he may be rusty at that point. And we'll be dealing with the same thing with Villarreal if we make it to an ALCS, and we're fortunate enough to have him back. So going to be some interesting decisions for our Oakland Athletics after a dominant regular season. And hopefully those late injuries aren't going to cost us all that much when all is said and done. So one spot on the pitching staff potentially still up in the air for the ALDS, depending on how Weiss's health looks in a few days after we get through those wild card series. And we have mixed things up a little bit when we think about our roster for the 14 position players going to have on the playoff roster, since we go with one fewer pitcher typically with all the off days. Having the extra player has allowed a lot of the guys who are kind of cuspy on our team, Chris Lance, Amari Alcindor, and Jesus Aguilar, to all be on the postseason roster. We are going to go with our normal lineup against right-handed pitching that has been pretty dominant throughout the season. We are going to change up one minor thing against left-handed pitching. And actually, we did change one thing against right-handed pitching, too. We put in the left-handed hitting Jesus Aguilar to give us a third lefty bat against right-handed pitching. He's not quite as good in center field as Bobby Armstrong is, but Armstrong, as you can see here, hit just 239 this year and 364 at-bats. And I think that potentially we'll get a little more offense out of Aguilar against right-handed pitching. And as I noted, it'll also give us a third left-handed bat to help kind of spread the lineup out a little bit more when they start bringing in some relievers for matchups in the middle to late innings of games. Against lefties, we also made a pretty significant change. The outstanding young designated hitter Juan Ramirez, who started 161 games for us at DH this year, we've taken him out of the lineup against left-handed pitching, and we've tightened up our infield defense. That's allowed us to move Luis Godina from second back to first. Allows us to move Chisin Iwata from short to second. And we can bring Phil Swenson in as our number 9 hitter to play shortstop for us. And then that hopefully will give us the opportunity to use Aguilar very strategically as a pinch hitter if and when they bring in a right-handed reliever, while also tightening up our defense over the course of the entire game. Meant to mention this at the end of the last episode, but I did not. Wanted to check in on Galteria Mancina, the rental that we picked up from Colorado, one of the top bats in baseball, or fictional baseball, over the past decade. And Mancina was very productive with us. Hit just 263 in 243 at-bats, but he still had 20 doubles, 13 homers, 53 runs scored, 48 ribbies, stole 10 bases, and put up a 129 WRC plus. And he's been so productive offensively that although we are going with the slightly weaker defense against right-handed pitching, with Mancina at first base, Godina at second, and Iwata at short, the thought is that anytime we go up against right-handed pitching, hopefully we're going to be battering them and scoring a lot of runs, and the little bit of degradation in our defense is hopefully not going to be all that significant. So we'll take a quick look now at the initial playoff matchups. We will be awaiting the winner of the Rays and the White Sox. The Guardians or the Red Sox will face off against the Tigers. The Nationals and Diamondbacks playing to get the opportunity to travel to New York to face off against the Mets. And then the Cubs and the Giants will be fighting one another to be able to take on the Brew Crew in a National League Division Series matchup. And we're going to have to make a decision on what to do with Mr. Weiss very quickly, as all 4 of the wild card series were 2-game sweeps. The American League East teams dominated, with the Red Sox and the Rays moving on in their American League wild card series. Over in the National League, it was the National League West dominant, with the Diamondbacks and the Giants both moving on. So we will be beginning a best-of-5 divisional series against the Tampa Bay Rays. And as we sit here, we thought that Weiss, last time we checked in, was about a week away from returning from that hamstring strain. And unfortunately, recovery has not gone well, so we're not going to likely put him on the roster. That means that if we get to a Game 4, Ernesto Comunez is going to be our starter. So the rotation of Arriola, Gallick, Baumler, and Comunez, not exactly what we were hoping for come playoff time. At most, only 2 of those guys, Arriola and Gallick, would have been in the roster that we hoped to have as far as our starting rotation. But at this point, we can cry over injuries and we can cry over spilled milk as much as we want. We've got to perform on the field with the crew that we have. Did get a comment to the last episode about needing to hire a better trainer, and I admit that Jordy Crisp is not a perfect trainer. Would love if there was still a Rick Jameson type available in this game in 2042, but unfortunately there isn't anymore. Crisp, we usually have going on a year-to-year contract. We actually did just have to sign him to 3 years at the start of this season, but not enough money that we wouldn't be willing to move on from him if we found a better option in the open market after we get to the end of the season. But in terms of the major injuries to 4 of our potential starting pitchers, Crisp is legendary at preventing arm injuries, so it seems like it's just a lot of bad luck that unfortunately has caught up with us in the late stages of this 2042 season. And as we prepare for this series with the Rays, despite the significant pitching injuries we're dealing with, we do have 3 of the 4 starters. Arriola, Baumler, and Gallick are on hot streaks. Keach and Rangel are as well. And Jonah Richards and Darnell Selvey, a couple of very important offensive players for us, are also hot. So when all is said and done, still would expect that we can get past this series against the Rays, even missing some of our key pitchers. We were 5-2 against the Rays this year. As we mentioned, the best offense and the best pitching staff in the American League. And when all was said and done, we outscored our opponents by 378 runs this year. So outscoring our opponents by over 2 runs a game over a 162-game season is a pretty dominant performance that contributed clearly to the 120 wins. The Rays were a 91-win team, pretty average offensively, tied for 7th in the American League, but a solid pitching staff that ranked 5th in the league in runs against. We will have our ace, Federico Arriola, who's now led the American League in wins, ERA, and WHIP for 2 consecutive seasons. Also led the league in walks per 9 innings, FIP minus, and WAR this year, as he attempts to become a back-to-back Cy Young Award winner in the American League after he stopped Steve Genus's 7 consecutive American League Cy Young Awards last year. Arriola, if you remember from last season in the playoffs, was very disappointing for us in a 5-game ALDS upset loss for our Oakland Athletics. The hope is certainly that things will go better this year, but he was 0-2 for us last year in the 2 games he started. Was not bad in terms of his performance, had a 2 ERA, but did take the losses in both the first game of the postseason and our final game of the postseason last year. Certainly hope that we'll get some victories from him in the postseason this year. He'll be going up against Andy Lewis, a 26-year-old former 7th overall pick who also looks like an ace. Made can't say his major league debut this year because he was up pretty significantly in 2040. Looks like maybe he had some injury issues in 2041, started just 3 games that year. 7-5 for the Rays this year, and he is fragile physically. 2.86 ERA and a 5 WAR in just 24 starts. Was named an All-Star back in 2039, so he's actually got a fair amount of major league experience for a 26-year-old. Spent parts of 4 seasons in the majors, and he's been a very productive pitcher when he has been healthy. So not an easy pitching matchup for us, but our offense is supposed to take care of that, and would love to get the series off to a big start here against Tampa. And we do get a 4-3 victory. Looks like Arriola outpitched Lewis, or at least he pitched good enough to get the win. Heilman, who is still in our stopper role with the save, got a home run from Jonah Richards, our potential American League MVP. Can't say it was an easy win. Tampa actually jumped out with a run in the first on a solo homer. We got a solo homer in the second from Richards, and then in the bottom of the fourth scored 3 runs, including a run-scoring single from Selby. They came back with runs in the 8th and the 9th to make it close. But we did get the series started with a victory. Richards 3 for 4 with a couple of ribbies, and Selby 3 for 3 on the day. Other than those two, only 2 other hits from Pimentel and Godina. So not a ton of offense, but we did come up with enough. Lewis allowed 7 hits, 4 earned runs over 6 innings. Arriola 5 hits, 2 walks, 1 run over 5 1/3. Wilson Rangel pitched an inning and 2/3 of scoreless ball for the hold. And Heilman was not as sharp as he's been most of the games he's pitched this season. Allowed 2 runs over 2 innings. But when all was said and done, he still did pick up the save. And our Oakland A's have a 1-0 lead on the Rays. So good news in Oakland to get game number 1 and a victory out of the way. Move on to game number 2, and this is the other one where we'll at least have a pitcher on the mound that we expected to be part of our playoff rotation in most scenarios, and that's Mike Gallick, who was 16-6 with a 3.44 ERA for us this year. Led the league with a 71% quality start percentage, put up a 3.3 WAR for us. Like Doug Weiss, he is a prospective free agent who's looking for some pretty significant money. So in the playoffs, every game Gallick pitches for us could conceivably be his last in Oakland, and we're hoping that means that we get great performances from him. Another good pitcher on the mound for the Rays, Kobe Flersheim, another youngster, 27-year-old lefty, 2-time All-Star already, 10-10 this year with a 4.20 ERA and a 5 WAR. So another really good pitching matchup here in Game 2 of the series. We get to take on a lefty with that lineup that we think tightened up our defense. Hopefully we'll still be able to score enough runs to get the victory. And we do get a 5-3 win. Gallick, the win, Flersheim with the loss. They did get a couple of home runs from the right fielder, Sergio Fuentes. Heilman with his second save of the series. No dingers for the A's, but we don't care how we score the runs as long as we score more than the opponents. Traded runs in the first. They came back with a run in the third on a Fuentes homer, but we unloaded for 4 runs in the fourth. Selby with a run-scoring double and Uresti with a 2-run double, and held on for the 5-3 victory. A bit more balanced offense today. Selby, the only player with a couple of hits for us. 2 ribbies for him, 2 ribbies for Uresti. And Phil Swenson, who was in there for his glove, goes 1 for 4 with a ribby as well. Gallick, 2 earned runs over 5 innings to get the W. And Rangel, Scherer, and Heilman combined for the last 4 innings, allowing just 2 hits, no walks, and 1 run. Flersheim, a rough outing, 7 hits, 5 earned runs over 3 1/3 innings. They got some really good relief after that out of Kim and Kloutman, but too little, too late for Tampa. And our Oakland A's will be heading across country to Florida with a 2-0 lead as we try to get back to an American League Championship Series. And as we enjoy virtually flying across the country on our off day, I got some interesting news from our farm system. Chris Jensen has retired. You may remember last episode we were talking about Coy Simmons, the young outfielder who we drafted out of college a few years ago that really did not develop as well as we expected for a first-round college player. Chris Jensen, ultimately a very similar career path, and his professional baseball career is now over. We picked Jensen 26th overall in the 2037 draft, and he never ended up making it to the majors. He spent parts of the last 2 seasons in AAA with us. This year, worked only out of the bullpen and had a 5.79 ERA over 18 2/3 innings. He's now 27 years old and was not a big part of our future, although it wasn't inconceivable that we would have given him a shot as a mop-up guy in the majors if we had another injury or two down the line. But I know some of you don't love the fact that I roll the dice on college players more often, or high school players more often than some of you in the early rounds of the draft. But I think what we've seen from Jensen as a first-round pick and what we've also seen from Coy Simmons is that, unfortunately, there's no guarantees among the more experienced and closer to fully developed college players either when they're prospects. It's all a roll of the dice and up to some luck in the development and perhaps some talent change randomness when you're hoping to develop some big leaguers in OOTP. And we head into Game 3 in Tampa Bay with the 2-0 series lead. Our hope would be to avoid a Game 4 with Comunez on the mound. We will have the righty Dave Baumler pitching for us. Had his best year in several seasons for us. Had a really nice 13-6 year for us 4 years ago in 2039. But set a career high with 14 wins this year, 14-3 record, 3.80 ERA. So a good solid season for the right-hander Baumler, but in a perfect scenario for us, he's a number 5 starter who's not starting for us in the playoffs. And with the injuries this year, he's our number 3. He'll be going up against the 24-year-old Humberto Cedillo, number 53 prospect in baseball, 9-6 with a 3.55 ERA for Tampa Bay this year in what will ultimately be his rookie season in the majors, put up a 3 WAR for them. So another good pitching matchup here today in Tampa, and our hope is that our A's will get the sweep. And we do, and after a couple of close games, 4-3 and 5-3, the A's offense erupted today, a 13-4 victory. Ibarra gets the win in relief. Cedillo takes the loss. Mancina, Richards, Godina, and Selvey, 4 of our biggest power hitters, all with home runs today. And Jonah Richards, who we're thinking may be the American League MVP when this season is completed, wins the ALDS MVP. So after a very disappointing ALDS finish for our Oakland A's a year ago, dominant performance over the Rays this year. We did fall behind 2-0. Godina with a 3-run homer to give us the lead in the third. They actually clawed back to tie us in the fourth and take a run lead in the fifth, 4-3. But after that, it was all Oakland, including a massive 8-run sixth inning. Selvey with a run-scoring double, Uresti with a run-scoring single, Pimentel with a 2-run single, and a lot of other big hits there in the sixth. Everyone in the lineup except for Aguiar had a hit, at least one hit for us today. Baumler was not great, 6 hits and a walk, 3 earned runs over 4 innings. But when all was said and done, we got the job done. Machajewski, a brutal outing, allowed 4 hits and 5 earned runs over just a third of an inning. And They ended up bringing in their starter Flersheim in relief as they were trying to do anything they could to salvage their season. But fortunately for us here in Oakland, we are moving on to the American League Championship Series. The Red Sox and the Tigers tied 1-1 in the other ALDS to find out who our opponent will be. The Brewers up 2-0 on the Giants, and the Mets and the Diamondbacks are knotted up 1-1 in their series. Taking a look at the injured list, Villarreal, the youngster, is now allegedly only 4 days away, while Weiss's return is still unknown. So optimistic maybe we'll have one of them back for a ALCS. It's going to be a bit risky to be pitching someone who hasn't pitched in 6 weeks, but those are the cards that we've been dealt. And it is a rare year in the Major League playoffs where all of the favorites won in the division series. The 4 teams that had home field advantage in first-round byes are Oakland Athletics, the Detroit Tigers, the Milwaukee Brewers, and the New York Mets are all going to be moving on to the League Championship Series. So the 4 best teams in baseball are the 4 teams that are left standing here in 2042. And we are going to have some decisions to make before we get things underway. Because the good news is that both Villarreal and Weiss are now healthy in theory. As I mentioned, a little concerned since neither of them has pitched since early September that we may have some rust that they need to shake off. And when you're in a playoff series where every loss is magnified, having some rough outings from a couple of starters could be a significant issue for us. But that said, they're both so talented that I think probably leaning towards figuring out a way to get one, if not both of them, onto the postseason roster before we begin the series against Detroit later on today. And we are going to bring both Weiss and Villarreal up to the roster, so that means we're going to have to move 2 guys off. And lefty Luis Aguayo, although we love his profile, has not been good for us this year, with a 5.45 ERA over 34 2/3 innings in the major leagues, was below replacement level. So he's going to lose his roster spot, and Camunez, who was going to be our number 4 starter if we needed him in the previous series, is also going to find himself out of a job for at least the American League Championship Series. And we're going to roll the dice with the 2 pitchers coming off of injuries, and also the fact that Weiss is in a slump right now. But we're going to put Weiss in as our 2nd starter, and Villarreal is our 4th starter for this series. Arriola is obviously our ace, and given that Gallic has a lot of stamina, thought it makes sense to break up Weiss and Villarreal in the rotation. Although, to be fair, there will be a day of rest between games 2 and 3. Actually, as I'm thinking about things, I'm going to swap Gallic and Weiss for the time being. Might give Weiss an extra day or 2 to magically perhaps break out of that slump that he's been in. And as it turns out, both Arriola and Gallic are hot right now, so want to get the ball into their hands as soon as we possibly can. And depending on how those first 2 games go and how we're feeling about taking the guys who haven't pitched in 6 weeks in potentially very important games 3 and 4 on the road, that will potentially, depending on how Baumler is used or not used in the first couple games, still give us an option to potentially swap the starter in game 3 of the divisional series in Baumler into the rotation for one of them, depending on what we think our needs may or may not be at that time. And as I mentioned, as we get ready for these league championship series, the two best teams in the National League, the 97-win Mets and the 92-win Brewers, will be facing off. And the two best teams in baseball, the 98-win Tigers and our 120-win Oakland A's, will be facing off in the American League Championship Series. It's kind of amazing. In a season when we were 120-42, we were 1-5 against the Detroit Tigers. So for whatever reason, they really had our number this year. We were 119-37 when we weren't facing the Tigers. So definitely an interesting development to be facing a team that dominated us during the regular season. Their pitching staff, second in the American League, so we're the only team that was better than them. And they ranked fourth in the American League in runs scored, so no surprise with an outstanding pitching staff and an excellent offense that they had a 98-win season, and they were very good against our squad. So a very tricky matchup here for our Oakland A's against a team that dominated us in the regular season, with the duo of Weiss and Villarreal that are coming off of those long injury layoffs, and also will be pitching on the road if we do decide to go with one or both of them in games 3 and 4. Feel like it's going to be pretty important for us to win these first two games in Oakland. We've got our ace Arriola on the mound for game number 1. And they'll be matching up with the 33-year-old Daniel Saucedo, 12-8 with a 3.50 ERA for the veteran this year. Put up a 3.9 WAR on the season. Good, solid left-handed hitter, and a left-handed pitcher. And we'll see if our predominantly right-handed hitting lineup can score some runs off of Saucedo here in game number 1. And we were able to score a lot of runs, a 12-5 victory for our Oakland A's. Arriola with the win, Saucedo takes the loss. Eric Keach gets a save. Guessing maybe he pitched the final 3 innings. They got 3 homers, a couple from Corinha and Shimazu, but Mancina, Richards, Godina, and Pimentel, all with home runs for our Oakland A's. We got on them early. They scored a run in the top of the first, but we came back with 5 in the bottom of the first. 3-run homer by Mancina and a 2-run double by Bobby Armstrong. Pimentel with a 2-run homer in the bottom of the second to give us a 7-1 lead, and didn't really look back at that point. A 12-5 win. Everyone except Uresti with at least 1 hit for us, and 5 guys with multiple hit games. Pimentel, Godina, Selvey, Richards, and Armstrong. Arriola, 7 hits, 4 earned runs, and a walk over 6 innings. Only struck out 2 and did allow a couple of dingers, but he did enough to get the victory to run his record to 2-0 in this postseason after being 0-2 in last postseason. Keach does pick up the 3-inning save, allowing 2 hits and 1 earned run while walking 3. Saucedo, we chased after just 1 inning of work and did a pretty good job against Chaeb and Almon, too, in a dominant performance for our Oakland Athletics here in game number 1. And game number 2 is still, in my mind, a very important game for Oakland to win. Will let us feel a little bit better about potentially pitching Weiss and Villarreal as starters in games 3 and 4, and perhaps needing them to shake off some rust in postseason action. We've got Gallick, who, as we mentioned, is on a hot streak after a 16-win season on the mound for us. Chris Kimbley 25-year-old right-handed pitcher, was 12-11 with a 4.03 ERA for the Tigers this year on the mound for Detroit. Nice waiver acquisition from them from Baltimore a couple of years ago, and he's won double digits 3 straight seasons for Detroit after Baltimore found him unacceptable as a 22-year-old and just let him go. So interesting decision by the Orioles there. As good as Kimbley's been over the past few years, our hope is certainly that we will get the win here today, as I said, with Weiss and Villarreal coming off of those long layoffs and injuries, and Weiss in particular being on a bit of a cold streak. Would feel a lot better going to Oakland going to Detroit up 2-0 with those two, the pending starting pitchers for games 3 and 4. And we will be heading there the way that we wanted, a 7-4 victory. Gallick with the win, Kimbley with the loss, Heilman with the save, Richards and the rookie Ramirez with home runs for us. Scored 3 in the 4th on a 3-run home run by our prospective Rookie of the Year, Juan Ramirez. Added another run in the 6th, and then after they came back with 2 in the 7th, scored 3 in the 8th. Pimentel, a 2-run double, the big blow there. They scored a couple more in the 8th to make it interesting, but still held on for a 7-4 victory for our Oakland Athletics. Gallick, 4 hits, 1 walk, and 11 strikeouts over 7 innings. Did allow 4 earned runs, so they made their few hits that they did pick up count. Rangel and Heilman combined for the final 2 innings of scoreless relief. Kimberly was actually pretty decent. Struck out 9 over 5 2/3 innings. Allowed 2 hits, 3 walks, 3 earned runs. Hedge looked like he had a rough relief outing, which probably didn't help Kimberly's numbers. May have allowed a inherited runner or 2 to score there in the... no, I guess he didn't in the 6th. There was just the 1 run that came across in the 6th, so it looks like that was Hedge's responsibility. But Kimbley had already fallen behind far enough to get the L. Their right fielder, Woo-Shun Lee, back injury while running the bases. So the first 5 games of these playoffs have gone about as well as we could have hoped for our Oakland A's. And now we're going to roll the dice with some pitchers coming back from injuries in game 3 and 4. I think our hope would be to, if we can win one of games 3 and 4 with the 2 pitchers coming back from injuries and have a 3-1 lead after 4 games of this series, that would be a position that I would certainly happily take with Oakland as we're sitting here ahead of our off day. And I mentioned we have been hoping that Doug Weiss's slump might magically go away if we waited longer till game number 3 before giving him a start. Unfortunately, coming off of an injury, and he's still in a slump. The left-hander had, for him, what was an off year this year, 9-5 record with a 4.02 ERA, but still put up a 2.6 WAR for us in the 26 games that he started. The righty, who's now almost 31 years old, 4th-round pick out of Austin Peay that we drafted as a reliever. We thought we might be able to turn in the starter, and he was a college pitcher that has worked out for us, but fragile physically and looking for a lot of money. So certainly coming off of the injury that he has had, his long-term future in Oakland definitely in doubt. A big clutch performance here today is certainly going to make it harder for us to move on from him this offseason. On the mound for the Tigers, the lefty Jim Nelson, 24-year-old, former 3rd-round draft pick, was 11-6 with a 3.73 ERA this year. Led the American League, allowing just half a home run every 9 innings. and put up a very solid 4.3 WAR. So particularly with Weiss coming off of an injury and being in a slump, I think you could certainly make a strong argument that the pitching matchup favors Detroit today in game number 3. Our hope is that we will still get the victory, but we do not. A 5-3 loss. Nelson with the win, Weiss with the loss. Our old buddy Jake Mendick with the save. Richards did hit a home run for us, but we've lost our first game of this postseason, 5-3. They jumped on us with 3 runs in the bottom of the first and added runs in the fourth and the fifth to take a 5-0 lead on us. We bounced back in the top of the 7th with 3 runs, including a run-scoring triple from Pimentel. But Mendick got Uresti to hit into a big double play in the top of the 8th, and although we out-hit the Tigers 10-8, they've definitely made it a series. Not a good outing from Weiss. 6 hits, 1 walk, only 3 strikeouts over 4 innings. Also allowed 4 earned runs. Baumler, Ibarra, and Heilman combined to allow just 1 run in 4 innings of relief. But we have proven that we are not invincible, losing for the first time this postseason. Positively, from a financial perspective, we've now gotten to the point where we've turned a profit on the year with 4 home games and road team proceeds from 2 road games in the playoffs thus far. So we're going to at least have delivered Mr. Fisher a profit. Now the hope is to deliver Mr. Fisher a profit with a World Series title and see if perhaps that will ultimately allow us to move up from the number 28 budget in all of baseball. We'll have to see when we can see whether or not Weiss is still exhausted, whether or not he's at least broken out of that slump. Certainly didn't pitch well today, but it was not a complete disaster. 64 pitches, not the worst number of pitches to kind of see from a guy who hasn't pitched in 6 weeks. I mentioned when we were headed here to Detroit that the hope was just to get 1 win from the 2 games that were going to be started by the guys coming off of injuries. That's still possible, but we are painted into a corner a bit in that we are counting on Villarreal to deliver us a victory. The left-hander, a very highly regarded prospect, the number 9 prospect in baseball. But before this season, he had pitched only 3 games above high A ball, and even this year spent most of the season in AAA before a call-up in the summer to AAA. He was spent most of the season in AA, if I could speak, before a call-up in the summer to AAA, and then a late call-up to Oakland before he suffered that injury. But he's been pretty effective at every level. Clearly can have electric stuff, and you never know what you're going to get with a guy coming off of an injury, but we're going to give the left-handed pitcher a chance, going up against the right-handed Mike Boyette, 30-year-old, 6-8 with a 5.68 ERA for Philadelphia. They traded him to Detroit, where he went 3-1 with a 4.47 ERA down the stretch. So he was much better in Detroit than he was in Philadelphia, but certainly does not have a profile that is particularly intimidating. The hope is that we're going to score a lot of runs off of Boyette today, and expect Villarreal, even if he doesn't give us a vintage performance, given that he's probably a bit rusty. The hope is that our offense will bail him out and score a lot of runs against Boyette, who did pitch well in his one ALDS start. Unfortunately, Boyette shuts us down. 3-0 loss, and we are knotted up at 2 games apiece. So was not expecting a performance like that from Boyette at all. Held us to just 3 hits. Tigers scored runs in the first, fifth, and the sixth. Our only 3 hits were a couple from Pimentel and 1 from Godina. Villarreal, 65 pitches coming off of the injury. 4 hits, 2 walks, 1 earned run, and 4 strikeouts. I guess our big hope now is that at least Weiss and Villarreal have a start underneath them to shake off some rust. Surgener, Ibarra, and Heilman ended up pitching for us, but when you're only going to get 3 hits, it's going to be tough to win in baseball. And give credit to Boyette. He allowed 2 hits over 5 innings. Did give us 4 walks, but we weren't able to get any runs. And after that, they allowed just 1 more hit to our old buddy Mendick over the final 4 innings. So a 2-0 lead is turned into a 2-2 tie, and a best-of-7 series is now a best-of-3 series between the 2 best teams in baseball. And we are going to make 1 change to our lineup going forward. Aguiar has not been productive at all, hitting .091 in the playoffs. We had put him in for Bobby Armstrong, as we talked about earlier in the episode, against right-handed pitching, but we are going to put Bobby back into the lineup. Gives us only 2 left-handed bats against right-handed pitching, but Armstrong is a bit better defensively, and if Aguiar is not going to be hitting, no reason to have him in the lineup. So a pivotal game number 5 here in Detroit. Whoever wins this one will head back to Oakland with a 3-2 lead. We've got our ace, Arriola, on the mound. They've got Saucedo on the mound. This was the matchup that was the rout in the series, our 12-5 victory in game number 1 at home. The hope is that we can have a similar result here today. And it was pretty similar, a 9-4 victory, so the another easy win. Schomer took the loss in relief for them. Arriola did get another win to run his record to 3-0 in these playoffs. Homers from Uresti and Godina. Taking a look at the box score, the Tigers actually jumped out to a 4-0 lead at home, and they held that into the top of the 6th inning, so they were feeling pretty good about things. But we got 3 in the 6th on a bases loaded double by Darnell Selvey, and then 4 in the 7th, Iwata with a run-scoring double, and then Godina with a 3-run homer. Added a couple in the 8th. The hope is certainly that Detroit letting a 4-0 lead in the mid to late innings at home evaporate takes the wind out of their sails for when they have to fly back across the country down 3-2. And it certainly was not a dominant performance by Arriola. 9 hits in a walk and 4 earned runs over 6 1/3 innings. 3-0 record in the postseason this year with a 4.58 ERA. As we saw last year, he was 0-2 in the postseason despite a 2 ERA. So your offense has to help you out, and it certainly has helped him out this year. Rangel and Surgener combined to allow just 1 hit over the final 2 2/3 innings. And our Oakland A's are heading home, up 3-2. And as we get home in Oakland, the potential Game 6 and Game 7, if necessary, starters for our Oakland A's are the veterans Mike Gallick and Doug Weiss, both of whom could be pitching their final game in Oakland as a member of the A's anytime they go to the mound. Gallick and Kimberly matched up in a rematch of Game number 2, which we won at home several days ago. And the hope is we can avoid a decisive Game number 7 by getting the win here today. over in the over in the National League, the Mets up 3-2 on the Brewers as they head back to Citi Field there. So the number one seeds both have 3-2 leads in the League Championship Series. Our hope here is to avoid a deciding game number 7, and we do with a 10-9 victory move on to the 2042 World Series. Ibarra with the win in relief for us. Nelson takes the loss for Detroit. Got home runs from Godina and Selvey. Godina's third of the series. Juan Pimentel is your series MVP. A dramatic finish to this one. Wow, a lot of runs scored in the early innings, and we had a 6-3 lead after 3 innings. They came back to tie it in the 6th, and then in the top of the 8th, they took a 9-6 lead on us that they carried into the bottom of the 9th. And in the bottom of the 9th, a pair of 2-run doubles from Arturo Uresti and Chisin Iwata push our Oakland A's into our 4th World Series appearance over the last 7 seasons. So a brilliant comeback for Oakland to get to the World Series. Everyone except Richards, the prospective American League MVP, had at least one hit. Pimentel 4 for 5 with a couple of ribbies to cinch his ALCS MVP award. Also got 3 hits, including a couple of runs scored and a ribby from Mr. Selvey. So a good performance from the A's. Gallick was not good. 11 hits, 1 walk, and 6 runs, 5 of them earned over 5 1/3 innings. But after that, other than Heilman, was pretty much lights out from the bullpen. Heilman, 2.16 ERA over these playoffs in that stopper role. And I'm not sure whether we've seen our former ace, Jesus Saldana, much, if at all, yet. He's in the closer role for us, but Heilman has been getting the predominance of the work, and until today generally done a pretty good job in that role. And given that we're headed to the World Series, we're not going to complain about anything. Could be in an interesting position with the likes of Weiss and Villarreal, potentially the next 2 guys up in our rotation to be starting early games in that series against either the Mets or the Brewers. But again, with a game under each of their belts, the hope is that they'll be pretty much back to what we hope them to be if they do go to the mound early in the World Series. And our Oakland Athletics are now 4 games away from a 4th World Series in the past 7 seasons. 4th World Series title, not just 4th World Series appearance, as we're trying to maintain our string of dominance in the even-numbered seasons. And we'll be facing off against the National League's best. The New York Mets took a similar path to us in the League Championship Series, beating the 2nd-seeded team in the league in a 6-game series. We're hoping that might go to 7 games to give our pitchers a little bit more rest, but that was not to be the case. As we've thought about our rotation, given that both Weiss and Villarreal are coming off of injuries and Weiss is still in a slump, we're actually going to move Weiss back to being the 4th man in our rotation, so he will in all likelihood only pitch once in the World Series. We'll find out whether or not we regret that move over the next few days, but we are going to go with the youngster Villarreal with the extraordinary stuff and hope that he and the rest of this team can get us the 4 victories that we still need to clinch the World Series and an epic season for our Oakland A's. The Mets, as we mentioned, the best record in the National League, 97-65. Very good offense, third in the National League in runs scored. Pretty average pitching staff, seventh in the National League in runs allowed. We will have our ace, Arriola, undefeated in these playoffs, on the mound in game number 1. The Mets with a pretty good pitcher of their own, the right-hander Alejandro Medina, 17-11 with a 3.91 ERA and a 3.9 WAR for the Mets this year. Was not an all-star this year, but was an all-star a few years ago in 2039. Certainly another good pitching matchup, and our hope is that we do what we've done in each of the first 2 series and get off to a not just 1-0 start in Oakland, but hopefully a 2-0 start over the Mets when all is said and done. We'll find out if I regret saying that when we see the results here in game number 1. But we do get a 5-1 victory. Arriola runs his record to 4-0 in this postseason. Medina takes the loss, Heilman with another save, and Richards with another home run. So the prospective AL Cy Young Award winner, the prospective AL MVP, and a likely very strong candidate for the Mariano Rivera Award for the American League, all key contributors to our 5-1 victory in Game 1 of the World Series. The rookie, speaking about awards, the potential Rookie of the Year, Juan Ramirez with a run-scoring double in the second to give us a 1-0 lead. They came back and tied it in the top of the 6th, but a solo home run from Richards in the bottom of the 6th put us up 2-1, and we added insurance runs in the 7th and a couple more in the 8th. Only 1 hit on the day allowed, so Arriola and the bullpen were fantastic for us. That run-scoring double by Keim, the only hit for the New York Mets. Interestingly, everyone except Armstrong had a hit for us. Arriola, 1 hit, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, and the 1 earned run over 7 innings. And Heilman with a perfect 2 innings pitched, including 4 strikeouts to earn the save. And we'll see, our old buddy, Alan Hunsaker, briefly with the Oakland A's several years back. We'll see if we can fulfill my hope of getting off to a 2-0 lead in this series here in game number 2. I've also been doing some initial scouting of the international amateur free agents as the postseason has been continuing. And we are going to go with the young lefty Luis Villarreal. Only 5 major league starts in his career, coming off of an injury, and he's pitching game number 2 of the World Series at home. Phil Routh, Bones Routh, veteran right-hander, 8-7 with a 5.35 ERA on the mound for the Mets. He does have a very diverse arsenal of pitches. So another good pitching matchup here. And a 3-1 win. Heilman with the win in relief. Mazza takes the loss. No home runs in the game. So we have held down the Mets' very good offense to just 2 runs over the first couple games of the series. Taking a look at the box score, traded runs in the 3rd inning, and then 2 runs for Oakland in the 8th to clinch things. Iwata reached on an error, and then a 2-run double by Godina. Held the Mets to just 4 hits today. So very good pitching performances from Oakland to begin this series, and just enough offense. Villarreal, 3 hits, 1 walk, and the run that he allowed was not earned over 4 1/3 innings pitched. Baumler, Surgener, and Heilman combined to allow just 1 hit and no walks over the final 4 2/3 innings of action. And our Oakland Athletics are heading to New York, only 2 wins away from a world championship. And as we get ready for Game 3 of the World Series in New York, our Oakland A's just 2 wins away from avenging the disappointment of last year when, despite having the best record in baseball, we got bounced in the divisional series. And in these next 2 games that could clinch a sweep for us, not that we want to get too greedy or ahead of ourselves, a couple of pitchers in Mike Gallick and Doug Weiss, who could both be pitching their final games ever in an Oakland A's uniform. Interestingly, if it comes down to Game 4 as a potential clincher tomorrow, our former ace, Jackson Ferris, who was a member of our first 3 World Series championship teams in Oakland, and when he and Colt Keith came over in 2029, that's when things really started clicking for this A's franchise. Could be the guy that we're trying to beat to clinch a sweep. But before we can even think about a sweep, we've got to win game number 3. Gallick, the right-hander, on the mound for us. 25-year-old lefty David Burgos, 12-10 with a 5.14 ERA for the Mets this year. A respectable left-hander, throws in the mid to high 90s. Not the greatest control in the world. Hopefully we'll be able to pick up some walks and continue to generate some runs against the Mets. And another lights-out game from our pitching staff, and not allowing the Mets many hits would certainly be a great result for Oakland. And another victory for Oakland, 3-2. So we are just 1 win away. Jesus Saldana finally got some action, his first appearance in the playoffs, and our former ace, who, coming back from his serious injuries a year ago, is now a guy without the stamina to be a starter anymore, but finally came through in his first appearance of this postseason. Gallick with the W, Mazza with the loss, Darnell Selvey with a home run. Took a 1-0 lead in the top of the 5th, but the Mets actually came back with 2 in the bottom of the 6th to take the lead off of Gallick, but a solo home run by Selvey in the 7th. A run in the 7th, and then the solo home run by Selvey in the 8th gave us the 3-2 margin. And we allowed just 3 hits to the Mets. They're 1, 2, and 3 hitters, all with hits, 2 of them doubles by Ham and Warham. But we've allowed the Mets just 8 hits in this series so far, and only need 1 more big-time pitching effort, and we will be the World Series champions once again. Gallick was excellent, 2 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts over 7 innings, allowed 2 runs. Heilman with 1 hit over an inning and 2/3. And Saldana, in his 1 performance of this postseason, threw 1 pitch to get the out to pick up his save. So very efficient, and certainly should remain well rested if we need him tomorrow. Burgos was good for the Mets. But the relievers Hinojos and Mazza both gave up a run, and in a low-scoring game, that was enough to push our Oakland A's to the brink of a 5th World Series championship over the course of this playthrough, and a 4th in the past 7 seasons. And we'll be heading now to game number 4, Weiss and Ferris in the prospective matchup for us. We talked about Weiss a lot coming off of the injury, hopefully with the 60-some-odd pitches he threw a week or so ago. He'll be sharper this time around. I believe he still is technically in a slump. Yeah, so that's why we pushed him back to game number 4. If this is his final game in an Oakland A's uniform, would love for him to go out with a great one. And as I mentioned, our former ace, Jackson Ferris, the veteran left-hander on the mound, he left us as a free agent signing several years ago to go to Detroit, and signed as a free agent with the Mets this year. 9-8, but a rather ugly 5.63 ERA. He, I guess at this point, has to fit the definition of a crafty lefty. He only throws in the low 90s. He's 38 years old, fragile physically, has a 4-pitch arsenal, but his stuff is certainly not imposing. And as a fly ball pitcher, he's prone to giving up a homer, although only 17 this year and 139 innings pitched was not awful. But our hope is maybe we'll hit a few off of him today, as we, at this point, would love to get the sweep and would love to hold the Mets to a very low offensive output, just to have our pitching that we were so worried about at the start of this episode ultimately be as dominant as we could have hoped. Not to be the case, though. Another rough outing from Weiss, and we're not going to get the sweep. Hopefully letting the Mets live to play another day doesn't come back to haunt us. Hinojos with the win in relief, Weiss with the loss, Salas with the save. Taking a look at the box score, we jumped out to a 3-0 lead. We're feeling really good about ourselves. And then they broke through for 6 runs in the bottom of the 5th. So Weiss had been pitching pretty well until then, ended up with a rough outing. The Mets with 9 hits today, more than they had in the first 3 games of the entire series. Weiss, when all was said and done, 5 hits, 1 walk, no strikeouts, 4 earned runs over 4 innings. Ferris, a couple of hits, 3 walks, 3 earned runs over 4 innings, so neither starter was particularly good. Ibarra with a rough outing in relief for us, while the Mets got scoreless relief from their bullpen over the final 5 innings pitched. Both Hinojos and Hunsaker were injured while pitching. And no sweep for our Oakland Athletics, unfortunately. But the main goal is to win the World Series, and still being up 3-1 with 2 games at home if we need them. Feel like we're in a good spot. That being said, we'd rather just win it today. Arriola 4-0 in the playoffs. Would love him to run his record to 5-0 this postseason in the matchup against Medina in the rematch of game number 1. And unfortunately, the Mets stay alive. They've won 2 in a row now in New York. So we were talking about a sweep just moments ago, and now we're beginning to get a little nervous about the dreaded 3-0 series lead collapse. Jonah Richards with another home run for us. Saldana takes the loss in his second performance of this postseason. Taking a look at the box score, we took a 1-0 lead, stretched it out to 2-0 in the 7th, but it was all tied up at 4-4 by the end of the 8th. And then a sac fly off of Rangel in the bottom of the 10th allows a run that was charged to Saldana to score. And we are headed back to Oakland. We've got the lead, but the Mets have all the momentum. Another 9-hit performance for the Mets. Richards up to 8 home runs in the playoffs, and as great as he's been, still doesn't lead the team in ribbies. That's Godina with 15. So the offense has been solid, and the pitching generally has been solid. Outstanding performance from Arriola. 5 hits, no walks, 1 run, not earned over 7 innings. Heilman blew the save. Saldana took the loss, and then Rangel, of course, gave up the sac fly that let that game-winning run in the bottom of the 10th. So not the performance we were looking for. And we'll head back to Oakland, still needing another win to put our true stamp on this 2042 season. And we're not that nervous yet, because we still have 2 games left at home and only need to win one of them. But the Mets have certainly seized the momentum from us over these last 2 wins of theirs. We've got a rematch of game number 2, which we won here in Oakland about a week ago. The youngster Luis Villarreal on the mound for our Oakland Athletics, going up against the right-hander Phil Ruth. Bones Ruth for the Mets, 8-7 with a 5.35 ERA this year. We won that one 3-1. We don't really care how we win this one. We just want to get the W and avoid putting ourselves in a position where we're going to be feeling a ton of pressure in a game number 7. And we get an easy victory today, 10-1. Ruth takes the loss. Ibarra gets the win in relief, so probably didn't get a ton of innings out of Villarreal. Stamina is really the only concern we have about him. But when all is said and done, our Oakland A's deliver a 10-1 victory. Jonah Richards, the World Series Most Valuable Player Award, as we've talked about, last year's American League Rookie of the Year, has now won a Division Series MVP and a World Series MVP this year, and we think it's very conceivable that he's going to add a Most Valuable Player Award to his World Series MVP award in the next few weeks. Taking a look at the box score, scored a run in the 2nd, broke it open a bit with 3 in the 5th, bases clearing double by Darnell Selvey, and then really broke it open in the 7th. 2-run double by Ramirez and a 2-run single by Uresti. Our deep lineup puts a lot of pressure on pitchers and ended up doing what it needed to do today to give us an easy victory in game number 6. Avoid the pressure of a winner-take-all game number 7. Held the Mets to 7 hits today, other than 3 hits from their leadoff hitter, Keim. Only 4 other hits on the day for New York. Ruth, not a great outing, and we also scored runs off of every reliever, Stiles, Pearson, Osuna, and Craig. Villarreal was good, just didn't get enough innings pitched to get the win through 84 pitches over 4 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 4 walks, 4 strikeouts, but no earned runs. Finishes up his first postseason with a 0.71 ERA. Ibarra with 2 1/3 innings of scoreless ball to get credited with the W, his 3rd of the playoffs. Baumler and Surgener finish things up for the Oakland Athletics. And as I mentioned, for the 4th time in the past 7 seasons, our Oakland A's are World Series champions. And following the brilliant 120-42 season that we had this year, with 11 postseason wins now in the books, the 131 victories by the Oakland A's here in 2042, the most of any season in baseball history. And as we get ready for the offseason to start tomorrow, Mike Blumenschein, the other pitcher, the other starter, big-time member of our rotation that we were missing throughout the playoffs, guess he would have technically been healthy and well for a game number 7 if we had some injury and wanted to try to get him onto the squad, but not necessary, fortunately, as we lock things up in game number 6. And our Oakland A's, after sweeping Tampa Bay, took a 6-game series against the Tigers and then a 6-game series against the Mets. So we never actually ended up facing an elimination game in any of the playoffs this year, with that overall playoff record of 11-4, as I mentioned, 131 wins on the year for our Oakland Athletics. Given the World Series championship and given the strong profitability that we delivered, certainly hoping that Mr. Fisher, when we move to the beginning of the offseason tomorrow, will report back and tell us that he's given us a decent boost to the budget. Who knows? Maybe we could be up to 26th or 27th in all of baseball in terms of the money we've got to spend. And we'll wait here patiently for all of the machinations of the end of the season and the beginning of the off season to get completed. So in our coming episodes, we'll do our deep, normal year-end review of our roster and start planning for the postseason, or the off-season. We've just completed the postseason. Take a look at some of our top prospects. Take a look at how some of the best players and our former players and the best prospects in all of baseball have performed this past year. We're likely, even with a decent bump from Mr. Fisher, to have to look to cut some payroll and move on from some guys this offseason. As I noted, Gallick and Weiss could be two that we move on from, although Saldana is a guy that, since he's no longer a starter, could be someone else that we look to move on. Might be time to finally move on from a guy like Amari Alcindor. So we're going to have a number of decisions to make, and some of them could ultimately save us some money. It's not inconceivable if we move on from Saldana, Alcindor, and one of Weiss or Gallick that maybe we can bring one of those two starters back if we want. Strong season score of 1333 this year for our Oakland Athletics. I think that's the best that we've had. Yeah, it's by far the best that we've had. We were 1197 when we won our third World Championship 5 years ago. But we've won the World Series over the last 7 years, took 4 out of 7. Still have never had a repeat with this team, but 4 World Series in 7 seasons is certainly nothing to turn our noses up at. The worst season we had in that entire run was a 93-69 season when we lost a wild card season. Since that year, we've been over 100 wins 4 out of 5 times. We're a 99 win team the one time that we didn't get to triple digits. And we have won 5 straight American League West titles. Check out the big news. Oh, and it went right to the budget, and there we go. Mr. Fisher, we made him a ton of money, and we won him a World Series championship. And as unfortunately I've come to expect at this point, although I felt like this year might be different, he's actually cut our budget by $4 million to $196 million. So John Fisher and his penny-pinching ways here almost 20 years into the future continues to make the fans in Oakland miserable. Review of the season goals. Disappointed that we didn't bring Jorge Mendoza back. Well, you don't give us any money to spend, it's going to be hard to bring back a guy who's making $30-some-odd million a year, Mr. Fisher. He's pleased that we won the championship. Wants us to win another World Series trophy to solidify our legacy. Delighted with our overall performance. Good with our performance in accomplishing goals. Next year and going forward, wants another championship. Acquire a power hitter. Improve our record in extra inning games and build a dynasty in the next 4 seasons. Looks like we've got some members of our staff retiring. Also, another coach leaving with the expiration of his contract, and we had a coach during the course of the postseason also leave when he got an offer from an independent league for hitting coach job with them, and we didn't have an open spot to promote him to try to keep him on board. So certainly would have to say, after the most wins in a season in baseball history and delivering a profit of almost $16 million to Mr. Fisher, it's a bit disappointing to have our budget cut back by $4 million. And you can see as we sit here, we've got no money at all to spend. And that's assuming that both Weiss and Gallick are already gone. So we're going to, as always, have some very interesting decisions to make as the off-season gets underway. But we'll be doing it from the ultimate position of strength with a 5th World Series title and an unprecedented 131 wins for our squad between the regular season and the postseason. So Fisher always makes things challenging. Going to be another off season where we're going to be turning over some important players, but we've done that a couple of off seasons in a row at this point, lost some very significant players, and all we've done is move from 106 wins to 108 wins to 120 wins. I don't know that we can get back to this insane level that we were at this season next year, but even if we end up losing all of the guys I've talked about, and that would include Saldana and Weiss and Gallick and Alcindor, certainly would anticipate that we should be one of the top teams in baseball once again. And we'll find out our initial thoughts on who we might want to bring back, whom you might want to bring up, and who will ultimately be moving on from in our next few episodes. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.